Welcome to Mind Body Besties, your weekly reset with real talk, a little laughter, and the kind of honest conversations you'd have with your closest friend. I'm Caty, a therapist.
And I'm Rachel, a naturopathic doctor. We're here to share the personal stories, struggles, and wins that have shaped our own health and happiness. This isn't a lecture, it's a safe space to slow down, connect, and feel a little more human again. So grab your coffee, get cozy, and let's reset together.
Welcome to Mind Body Besties. Today we're going to be talking all about fertility, which is a really, really hot topic these days. We've got some clinical stuff to talk about. We've got personal experience. So this is going to be a jam-packed episode.
Yeah, and did you know that 1 in 4 pregnancies, so not just 1 in every 4 women, but 1 in every 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage or stillbirth? So
that seems very high, but also knowing my experience makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we're in a day and age where we can talk about this really openly, which I love.
And I think the more people talk about it, the less alone other people feel. So if you can, and obviously if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to, but if you feel comfortable talking about it, I think that shared experience is really helpful for a lot of people.
I think so too.
All right, where do we want to start?
Let's go ahead and talk about share your part of the story first.
Sure, yeah. All right, buckle up, everybody. So in 2023, in February, Logan and I decided that we were ready to start trying to have kids. So we tried for a couple months and I got pregnant in May. And we were excited, but it was a really weird experience. So basically what happened is I thought that I had had my period, but then I started bleeding again, and not a lot, like 2 weeks later. And so I thought, this is really weird. It's not making sense. I'm going to go take a pregnancy test because I've never been pregnant before. I don't know. So I went and took one and it was positive. And I was really excited and Logan was really excited, but I kept saying something seems weird here. Like this doesn't make sense. So that was on the weekend. And on Monday, I called my OBGYN and I said, hey, this is what's going on, but I have a positive test. And they said, all right, come in and we'll confirm the pregnancy. So I went in and they did just like a urine pregnancy test, but then they also drew blood to see where my HCG was at. Do you want to explain HCG in case people don't know?
Yeah, that's the hormone that increases at a very particular rate as the pregnancy progresses. So we can measure it to know how far along and to make sure that the pregnancy is progressing normally.
Yeah. So basically they did the blood test and said, we'll let you know tomorrow, most likely. And then I went home and within like 24 hours, I hadn't even gotten my HCG back yet. I started bleeding again and I was feeling really, really bad.
Did you just have a gut feeling too?
Yeah, something just didn't feel right. And I don't want to say I didn't feel pregnant because I didn't. It was so early, and we didn't know how far along I was, but I would guess 6-ish weeks. So we went to the ER and they did a blood test and they were like, your HCG is it was something like 5.
It's really low.
Yeah. And so they were like, we're really sorry, but this is a miscarriage. And I remember just feeling so numb and being like, I can't believe this happened to me. It wasn't something I had ever really thought about. I just was like, oh, you get pregnant and you have that baby.
Right.
But I did know my mom struggled with fertility and she had a miscarriage before she had me. And so we were just kind of in shock and didn't really know what to do. And they said, you're gonna kind of bleed like a heavy period, go home, rest. And if you have any pain or really bad cramping or anything, call your OBGYN ASAP. Or if it was if you're bleeding through 2 pads and then every hour you need to come back. And I was like, okay. So waited that out, went back to the OBGYN and I was like, hey, what happened? What do we need to do here? And they basically were like, I know this is bad, but it just happens sometimes. And I was like, okay, are we going to do anything? And they're like, no.
No labs, not check anything.
No, they didn't check anything. They said, but we can put you on letrozole. And they explained that to me, and I was just kind of like, okay. Like, I assumed that's just what you did. So I did a round of letrozole, and I can't remember if I got pregnant again 1 or 2 cycles after that miscarriage, but I got pregnant again. So I called the OBGYN. They said, okay, come in immediately. We're going to do your HCG levels, and then we're going to have you come back in 48 hours to make sure they've at least doubled. And then we'll know, like, if this pregnancy is going to stick. So we did that, and my HCG did not double, not even close.
That'd be so sad. And so, like, just so many emotions to go in and see that.
Yeah, it was. They would send everything to Quest, and I would get my results on Quest at night. And I was, like, waiting up till midnight to have them come in and see.
Right.
And then I'd see them by myself and just start crying. And then the next day they called me, and they knew I'd already looked. They'd be like, did you see? And I'm like, yeah, I already saw. So then it was like, okay, well, just... you should start bleeding, soon-ish. Just kind of wait it out. If you have any really horrible cramping, you're like hemorrhaging, whatever, come in. And I was just like, okay.
And so at this point, they still hadn't checked your hormones or offered you progesterone?
No. So I went back in. I can't remember how many. It might have been a week or 2 later. They tested my HCG again to make sure it had gone all the way to 0, and it had.
Which, by the way, I want to put in there that a lot of times they don't have you come back in to do that. And you can always advocate for yourself. And if you do experience a miscarriage or a loss, come back in to make sure it's 0, because there's such thing as a molar pregnancy and things that can impact your future fertility if your HCG doesn't drop.
Yeah. So they did have me come back in and do that. And I said, okay, I've been doing my own research. What blood tests can we do? I already know I want my thyroid checked, and like anything else you can check, please check. And they said, okay, we can test your progesterone and your thyroid hormones. So they did that blood test, and they said, yeah, your progesterone is like a little bit low. So whenever if you're trying and you get pregnant again, here's progesterone in pill form. The second you get a positive test, start taking this.
Okay, we need to talk about this.
Okay.
Because oral progesterone, I'm so confused. Usually we use vaginal progesterone instead of oral. And did they tell you a time in your cycle to check your progesterone, or it was just a random day?
It was just a random day.
See, we have to check hormones there's 2 particular times of the month, and progesterone is 1 week after ovulation, which is also 1 week before your predicted period. So, interesting. Keep going.
Yeah. So, they did that. I got my thyroid stuff back, and they said everything looks good. And then I remember later showing you those labs, and you were like, they only did half the thyroid test. Like, this tells me nothing. And I was like, okay, great. I'm really glad that they did so much. So then I was like, do I need to see like a specialist? Do I need to go get more testing done?
I don't want to go through this again.
Because I'd really like for this to not happen again.
Preventative is better.
And they said, well, no, this is really common, and it's not considered recurrent loss until you've had 3 miscarriages, and then we can do like some more stuff. And I remember just sitting there, and I knew it was an insurance thing because I bill insurance at my practice, and I knew it was an insurance thing, but it was still so like demoralizing to sit there and be told, no, you need to do this one more time before we're really going to look into this for you. So I just felt really helpless. I went home, and like I kind of overreact to a lot of things and jump into like, let's fix this mode. I was about to make an appointment at Yale. I looked at Yale and somewhere else, and I was like, all right, Logan, we're going to make this appointment with this reproductive endocrinologist, and we're going to get on a plane, and we're going to go. And he was like, okay, if that's what you really want to do. And I got as far as like almost making the appointments before I was like, okay, maybe we should wait on this because this is going to be a really expensive trip and appointment.
Fair.
But I thought, well, no one here is going to help me.
Yeah.
And we don't have, I think there's one reproductive endocrinologist in this area. And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just get out of Arkansas and go somewhere else.
I love the field of reproductive endocrinology, but they also tend to not do full blood work until you've had 3 losses.
Yeah. And that was the other thing that I was running into is I didn't know if they would even let me make an appointment.
Yeah.
So Then after that second miscarriage, I got pregnant again, and I can't even remember. I want to say it was September. Yeah, it was September. And everything seemed to be okay. They were doing early ultrasounds, like before you could even see a heartbeat, just to make sure everything was going fine. And my HCG this time didn't quite double, but it was so close that they were like, okay, let's keep watching. So I went in for an ultrasound and they were like, we should technically be able to see a heartbeat, but we don't. Come back in, I think it was 3 days. And I remember leaving there and being like, well, this isn't going to work either.
Devastating.
Yeah. So we went back 3 days later and there was no heartbeat. And that was the farthest I had ever gotten because I think it was about 8 weeks. And they were like, we're really sorry. Like now you're just like watch and wait. There's no reason to do a DNC right now. Let's just see what your body does. And I said, okay, fine. Well, a month in to seeing what my body was going to do, I started having all like really bad anxiety and just being like, not to dehumanize it, but like, I want this thing out of me.
Well, yeah.
I want
know
it. I want it gone.
I mean, at this point, it's not alive. It's dead fetal tissue. And your
Yeah.
body is like, this is not self. I want to get this out. It's going to cause me an infection.
And so I was like, I just want this out. And so I called and said, hey, will you guys do a DNC? And they said, we don't recommend that. There's no reason to do one. We can give you methotrexate to start the process. And I had looked up methotrexate and I was like, that's like a chemo drug. And I really would prefer to not have all the side effects that come with it. And they were kind of like, okay, well then just keep waiting.
I remember we talked about that. That made me really upset because first line.
Yeah, I think I
care-
texted you.
Yeah. First line is using mifepristone and misoprostol. And because this is really in Arkansas here, not a pro-choice state, they weren't offering that even to people who are suffering real miscarriages and going through this devastating process. So that made me like, I just remember being livid that they weren't offering you standard of care treatment.
Yeah. So those are my options. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to wait. And then thankfully, 2 weeks later, so 6 weeks of waiting, finally my body started to do it on its own, which was preferable to, and it wasn't like I was jumping at getting a DNC and having a surgery.
No one wants to have to get a DNC.
But the emotional toll it was taking on me was like getting to be too much. And as a therapist, I was like, I am not well. Like, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And if it continues much longer, I'm going to really have a problem.
Honestly, I can't imagine going an entire month in that situation.
Yeah. And I will say intermittently, I would go in, they would check my HCG and make sure it was still going down. They did do that. So they like made sure I wasn't going to, I don't know, die, whatever, or have a molar pregnancy.
Get though. It's crazy.
Yeah, you totally can. And like a few people that knew what was going on were like, have you passed it yet? And I'm like, no, like I'm just waiting. And so finally my body did its thing. That was a relief. And then we were kind of at the point where we were like, do we even want to try again? Do we need to look into IVF? Which it was a weird space to be because it wasn't like I couldn't get pregnant. That was not a problem.
Right.
But keeping the pregnancy was the issue. So we just kind of took a break and decided like, let's figure out what we even want to do. Do we want Logan to go get tested to see if it's a male factor thing, which we should also talk about that.
Yeah.
And we decided like, I guess we're gonna not try, but we're not gonna do like the whole timing and look at your cycle and whatever. And then right before Christmas, I ended up getting pregnant again. And thank God that one stuck. And now I have we have Ivy. We have a 13-month-old. But the whole process was just, terrible. And then even my whole pregnancy with Ivy was like constantly, okay, let's make it to 8 weeks. Okay, let's make it to 12. All right, you're out of the first trimester. Like it should be okay now. And it was all these like, but what if? And I was so paranoid about feeling her move. I went 3 times to the emergency little department at my OB to be like, I haven't felt her move all day. Like, can you please just check? And that was expensive. was expensive to go to the little emergency
But
department.
of course, your brain wanted to know
Oh, yeah.
things are okay.
And I had to, I had to make sure. And so
Yeah.
did that 3 times, and they were so nice to me. They like knew my history, and they were like, if you're worried, just come in. Like
Oh.
it's worth the peace of mind. They were really great.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my whole journey.
Wow. Yeah. I remember at one point we were talking about the MTHFR kind of things. When did you find out that you had that mutation?
So I actually don't have.
Oh, you
we
don't have
we
it. Okay.
thought I had it, but I don't. So let's talk about like some of the like, blood panels you would have done on me and what treatment you might have done, because I did actually go to Rachel and we had an appointment, and it was literally the day after I found out I was pregnant, and she was like, okay, well, let's maybe wait and see. But you had this whole list of things, and then I'll talk about some of the alternative medicine stuff I did too.
And at that point, because of your history, it was like, let's do everything instead of doing it in the tiers that we usually do it in. Because in the functional world, we could still only draw so much blood from someone at once.
Right.
So,
well, you had said you may have to go 2 or 3 times. And I was like, okay, at least we're
going to figure this out. No, I mean, so I think one of the number one things, well, okay, before I dive into the blood work, one of the number one things that I see is people are taking a bad prenatal that it actually would be better if they weren't taking it, because it's not the methylated form of B vitamins.
Right.
So they're blocking the formation. The fetus needs a lot of methylfolate for your growing baby to be able to keep growing. And so if we don't get that methyl version, we're actually sometimes blocking our body from getting the good version by taking the bad version. We can't even get the good version from our food. So that's a big thing that I've seen.
Yeah, that would be cool if like my OB had told me something like that. They say just go get a prenatal, go get whatever. Make sure you're taking one. So that was something I didn't know. And I think you looked at mine and said, this isn't like, you were nice about it, but you were like, this is wrong. And then I had gone to my chiropractor, which I'll talk about that. And he put me on a different one, and it was the correct methylfolate.
Yes,
version.
methylfolate and methylcobalamin. So that's a big one. And then probably in terms of lab work and what's going on in the body, one of the number one most common things I see is your iron is low. So everyone will say, no, my doctor checked me for that. And really, they got a CBC looking at their blood cells. That just tells me that you're not anemic. It does not tell me your iron status. And so there's actually a whole iron panel that we can do. And we don't even just want to check your iron levels. We want to check your storage iron in the body called ferritin. And even if the lab says it's okay, it has to be higher than what the lab says, or it's not okay. So
I actually have low ferritin right now.
That's right. It causes fatigue, everyone. And so that's a big one, is looking into the ferritin and looking into the iron. And then probably the second most common thing I see is thyroid. So you can have a normal TSH brain signal to your thyroid, and you can still be hypothyroid and have low thyroid hormone. Or even if you're asymptomatic, like you don't really have a lot of fatigue, you're not having the dryness in your skin or your hair, your nails, you can still have a really high TSH. And so basically, even though it's low thyroid, that comes with a high TSH. It can be kind of confusing. But if your TSH is above 3, or if your thyroid markers are low, even if the lab says they're normal, because the lab has a crazy range of what's common in society, that doesn't mean it's healthy normal. So like the lab keeps adjusting every year and adjusting markers to meet how unhealthy our population is. That doesn't mean it's normal.
Right. It's not, you want it to be optimal, not somewhere.
Close to optimal, like functional. So those are probably the top 2 that I see. And then that's regardless of what's going on with your hormones. So hormones is huge. Our sex hormones, if they're not balanced, or if we don't have enough progesterone, then we can't even be having consistent ovulatory cycles. If our progesterone is above 5, we're at least ovulating. But what if our estrogen isn't enough to balance that out? And so we don't even have a thick enough uterine lining for implantation to happen.
Yeah, I think my progesterone was at 9 or 10 when they checked it, and they were like, not great, but not terrible.
That's functional. That's doable. But a lot of times our other hormones will be off. So a lot of times people just look at progesterone and they miss looking at the big picture of how are the follicles developing and how's the uterine lining health coming along.
Right. We never looked at any of that.
Yeah, and there are even more sex hormones that you can check beyond what is normally checked, even if you ask your gynecologist to check. So there's whole extra panels that we can look at, and we can look at cortisol, that stress axis, because that also affects your brain signaling down to your reproductive organs and affects everything.
Yeah.
So those are huge. Nutrient deficiencies are also really missed, like vitamin D and B vitamins. Inflammation can be missed. I mean, people even have things like missed autoimmune conditions or missed mold exposure that can show up.
Yeah.
And then I'd say the other big thing I check for in the first line of things is clotting. So microclotting or having a clotting disorder that you wouldn't know that you had, like antiphospholipid syndrome.
Yes.
That can show up.
Actually, my OB after the second loss said, go ahead and start taking a baby aspirin every day,
Yes.
just in case.
Yes.
And so I did that for all of those pregnancies.
Yeah. And that's a very real strategy. A lot of times a reproductive endocrinologist will check those labs, but if you don't know, or if you're doing something like IVF, I can't tell you how many people, there's so many different processes for IVF. So
yeah.
I've had patients who've gone to really good clinics that put them on progesterone and put them on aspirin to do everything proactively, preventatively. And then there's clinics that don't really do anything, and they just actually have you take birth control and then stop taking it at a certain time. So everyone is synced up so they can give injections at the same time. So your body is starting and stopping birth control, which
I wish you
don't
could see my
recommend.
face right now. Like, that is just so, you're spending so much money.
And it's so painful, and it's such an emotional investment too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've seen lots of, I'll talk about this a little bit more later too, but I've seen lots of people go through IVF on like YouTube, and they'll show their whole process, and it's awful, and their stomachs are all bruised from all the shots, and they feel bad.
Women are warriors.
Yeah, they really are.
They're truly warriors.
So that's just so wild to me that they wouldn't do the preventative
They
care.
wouldn't, and they haven't checked hormones. Like, oh man. And there are some times when they went ahead with a transfer when the uterine lining wasn't, it was like a borderline thick enough. Like, they really should have been thicker for you only have 4 embryos.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot there. I mean, obviously I'm not an IVF provider, so there could be a lot more that's going on in someone's head. But from my perspective, where I'm looking at the big picture, I'm looking at all the labs, looking at the function of the body, I think it's crazy to offer someone IVF without testing their iron and their inflammation and their autoimmune markers and their clotting and their vitamin D.
Right. Because it's like if the setting that
The terrain.
Yeah.
It's not optimal.
Yeah. And so then if you put a baby in there, then it's not going to grow and it's not going to thrive. So why would you do it?
Exactly. That's 1,000%.
Yeah.
And if you know that you're working with an obstacle that's not fixed, or that's not movable or influenceable, then fine. Like, I totally understand you're taking your odds, but I don't think I've ever worked with someone who's actually in that situation. I think it's always been, there's shiftable stuff that we could work on.
Yeah. And I also get people are so desperate at this point for something to work that they'll almost try anything or just have like blind faith.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work out a lot when you do that, which is really sad. But yeah.
The desperation, I mean, this isn't something I've personally gone through, but it's like your experience going through this with your clients if they've had infertility.
Yeah, so I actually haven't worked with anyone dealing with fertility issues since I've had a baby, but I have had clients that either couldn't get pregnant or had miscarriages, and it was just very sad, and now it's even more sad because I personally understand it.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing was always, what am I doing wrong? And I wish, and I had the same thing. I was like, what am I doing? Am I not eating right? Am I not exercising enough? Am I not, like, what am I not doing? And I wish someone had told me, like, it's not your fault. You're not doing anything. And no one ever said it was my fault, but they never told me it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I always want my clients to know, like, hey, it's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. And then another big theme is no one is listening to me. they're just telling me whatever they're telling me, and I don't get to ask enough questions. I'm not getting explanations for why they're doing what they're doing, or they're desensitized completely and they're saying, yeah, when you have 3, we'll do something about it. And I understand that healthcare providers get desensitized to that. I'm desensitized to some things, but you still have to remember that you have to show that empathy for someone because
And
it's a horrible
explain,
experience.
like,
Yeah.
just tell people why you're doing what you're doing.
We're not all doctors. We don't all know what everything means. So, yeah, those are the 2 biggest themes, but it is really, really hard and devastating. And I can't imagine having later losses either, or like a stillbirth, because then like you've spent so much time pregnant and preparing for this baby, and then you have a loss. Like that's also terrible.
Yeah, truly. The things that, I don't know. There's things that we go through in life that are just, I think, beyond being okay. And they just are what they are. And I feel like that's one of those things.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things that I did, I got really into watching people making videos on YouTube that had miscarriages or were going through infertility. And I watched a lot of those videos, and it just made me feel a lot less alone because I didn't know anyone who had gone through what I was going through. And so I needed someone to talk to, and I couldn't talk to them, but I could watch the videos and be like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. I felt that way too.
It does seem great that people share about their experiences if they feel comfortable.
Mhm.
I really do think that helps everyone understand the process that you go through and the grieving and all the emotions, and that
Yeah.
it's normal. And
Yeah, and that's why like I think we both wanted to do this episode too, because 1, there's so much people don't know, but 2, if you're going through this, it can be helpful to hear someone else's story, even if they're
Yeah.
not exactly the same. You just know you're not the only one.
yeah, 1,000%.
And I learned a lot about cycle tracking because I was like, all right, I don't actually know anything about ovulation or any of this stuff, so I better learn this.
And can I just say that as millennials, what a failure of our public education
Oh my
system
God, yeah.
that we didn't learn anything as women about our cycles and ovulation. And
No.
guess what? Like you have a fertile window of a few days in the middle of your cycle, and here's what's going to happen with your fluctuating hormones.
Oh, I had no idea. And it was like kind of embarrassing that at 30, I guess I was 32 years old, like I didn't know that stuff, but no one ever taught me.
No, yeah.
So I learned a lot about that. And then I also did a lot of research into like alternative medicine to help with fertility. And so I did end up doing acupuncture specifically for fertility.
It has amazing results.
Well, actually, so I started after my 2nd miscarriage. I did have a 3rd miscarriage, but after that, when I had been going like consistently, then I got pregnant and stayed pregnant.
Yeah.
And then I also went to my chiropractor, who's like really more of a functional medicine kind of practitioner. And he did more blood testing on me that I couldn't get my OB to do. And he also gave me some supplements that were pregnancy safe in case I did get pregnant. And I mean, after all of the stuff I did, no one ever found anything wrong with me. And so I
Yeah.
never got an answer as to why. And so if I'm ever thinking about a 2nd kid, now it's on my mind like, oh my God, what if I have to go through that again? Or what if I don't get pregnant this time? Or what if I just keep having miscarriages? And so that's why when people are like, are you going to have a 2nd kid? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, man.
That's hard. My fertility doc mentor, she told me that 50% of couples will never know why they can't conceive.
Is that because we just really don't understand, or because people aren't trying hard enough to figure it out? Or
I think it's probably so many things. I think a lot of people don't even know things as standard as you've got to be trying at least 3 days around ovulation, like at least 3 times to even be successfully trying. So I think there is a lot of education that's missing. I do think people aren't checking these labs, so they're not going to find out. But there's been some people I've worked with who we've done everything. A couple of them, a few months later, will write me a message and be like, hey, I'm pregnant now. Because it takes a little bit for your body to balance out hormones. But there's been a handful of people that we have done literally everything. Their partner has had a semen analysis and everything was normal. We talked through the whole, hey guys, for the male partners, no smoking, no alcohol, no hot tubbing, no sauna. We go through the whole list. No marijuana use either. and everything is on track. Everything is testing well. Even cortisol and everything looks good, and just still not naturally getting pregnant. And so in those cases, we can ask them to go discuss with their gynecologist getting an HSG to look and see, let's put some saline through the tubes, make sure they're open.
Okay, I also did that. I forgot about that.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. So I did do that. And beforehand, they were like, you might want to take some ibuprofen. It feels like period cramps. And I know everyone has different experiences with this stuff. It was so painful. I literally remember like curling my toes and like gripping, like just, oh my gosh, it was so painful. Thankfully,
that's a whole other topic we can have about women's pain not being treated.
Oh
in
my
healthcare.
God. Thankfully, it was very quick and the
Yeah.
pain then subsided. But I was like, whoa, guys, you did not
You need to tell us that's more than a pinch.
I'm like, what? Could you please warn a girl? It was so painful. And
That's
that also turned out
awful.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing wrong.
So we can do HSG. Sometimes they even go so far as to do endometrial biopsies, which is like really painful as well. But sometimes everything turns out okay. And, you know, there can still be abnormalities in the uterus that structurally wouldn't even be able to see very well. Like usually we can see stuff like if it's a heart-shaped uterus or something that could be affecting it. But the imaging doesn't pick up everything. And there's not labs to detect all infections, and not all infections would cause an abnormal biopsy. So if someone has hidden, we'll just go extreme and say Lyme, that commonly can affect the uterus. And that's not going to be a test that is being screened.
No.
Like we're looking for ureaplasma. We're not looking for Lyme if we do it the conventional way.
Yeah. There's just so many factors, and I learned so much from all of the obsessive research that I did. But it was kind of like, okay, if no one else is going to figure this
You
out,
have to advocate for
I'm going to
yourself.
figure it out. And I mean, there were definitely some things that I was like, I think I have this. And Logan would be like, okay, probably not. And I'm like, well, we don't know. So we should test for that. Like, I don't recommend researching so much that you start like.
But if you feel like you don't have that support.
Yeah, then you just obsessively research. And in a way, it helped. It gave me something to do. So instead of being sad, I could just learn stuff. So I don't know. It goes both ways.
I think it is empowering to learn the info. And also it's so nice when there's someone you're working with who can just tell you, here's the info that matters. You don't need to go online. Here you go.
Yeah, that's also very helpful.
Yeah.
What else?
So before we got on and we started recording, we talked about the whole insurance thing for a second.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be helpful for people to know that your doctor can say no, but even if insurance isn't going to cover all these labs after a first loss, which, by the way, I have actually never seen insurance deny just because someone hasn't had 3 loss. So I think that's more just standard textbook.
I
We're
think it is
following the
too.
algorithm. Yeah. But you can ask for these labs, and if your insurance isn't going to cover it, I mean, first of all, usually when you walk into Quest, for example, they give you an estimate. They run it through insurance already. They say, hey, it's going to probably be like $50. Do you want to proceed? So you can just go in and see what it is and then decide.
Yeah.
Or you can be like, I just want to do these cash pay. Like, I want you to check everything you can possibly think of. I don't care if you think it's not going to be insurance covered.
Like,
Don't
I'll
make
just
that
pay
decision
for it.
for me. Yeah. That's something we learned in medical school, but it's hard because we're stuck in this rigid insurance system. But technically, you're not supposed to make financial decisions for your patient.
You can say, hey, I don't care. I'll just pay for it. But it is also such a shame that insurance has these rules because a lot of people can't afford that because some of these tests are expensive. Some aren't so bad. Some are really expensive. And I know from billing insurance for mental health, there are things that insurance just won't cover. It's multifaceted, but
It's frustrating.
you can
for
always
sure.
not use your insurance.
It's
That's
true.
always an option.
It's true. You could always not use your insurance. Yeah, I actually don't do insurance covered work with my people I work with anymore because then we can just get all the labs at the cheapest cash pay price and not have to worry about the gamble.
I would love to not use insurance, but the area that we live in, it would not be doable for a lot of people.
It's true.
And I would not have a business, so I do it. But I mean, it's a huge pain. It's like my least favorite thing to do.
I'm hoping that I do see positive changes happening with insurance. Like we're making things more standard and insurance is starting to cover things. For example, when I had my Crohn's, when I was like 13, 14, I got diagnosed. Back then you had to wait to progress to each tier of medication. So I had to do injectable chemo meds. I had to do the crazy high dose steroids every day for 6 months. I had to do all these other really intense oral meds. And then I had to fail all of the lower generation, first generation biologic meds before I could do the ones that were working and performing the best for Crohn's.
Oh my God.
So I had to fail at least 12 meds before. And this could have been how my doctor was working within the insurance system, but I know that a big part of it was the insurance because we'd get denials if we tried to accelerate to the next med. So I had to wait and have allergic reactions to meds. I had to do whatever until I could get to the next med.
Oh my God.
So it's frustrating. And I do think that I do think that shapes our healthcare in a big way.
Yeah. What are some of let's not forget about the men. What are some of the male factors of infertility?
Yeah. So genetics can come from both sides. We're making an embryo and it's going to be half the genetic material from dad and half the genetic material from mom. A lot of times we're not testing genetics unless we're doing something like IVF, and then the IVF clinic will offer genetic testing on the embryo. But there are some genes that we can test directly. So in women, there's clotting genetics that can be tested for early. For the men, it's hard because there's not as many concrete factors, but with all the new research coming out, it's getting so much more clear what we've always inherently known, that men's role plays a huge role in the health of the baby and in the pregnancy for the mom. And so I'm curious what you think. I love the idea of women are going to carry this baby for 9 months. They're going to prep before that. They're going to do stuff beyond that. Postpartum is a whole other thing. So like, I love this idea of if a guy wants to be a father, commit 9 months to cutting out alcohol, cutting out smoking, getting really good sleep, like take care of yourself, exercise, hydrate, eat protein, do all the things that you need to do to have the healthiest genetic material. Because men are making new sperm every couple months.
Yeah.
So it matters.
I love that idea. It's like, okay, men, you wanna do something here too?
Yeah, be involved.
And also when you're thinking about starting to get pregnant, I think when the woman starts making sure like she's doing everything she can to be healthy, the male should too, because they're making,
I think so too.
They're half this baby. But society has put everything on the woman because you're the one carrying the pregnancy. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of times infertility gets, I don't know if I want to say blamed, but they think it's an issue with the woman when it could very well be male factor infertility.
I just laugh thinking back to, we learn about royalty, the kings beheading their wives, and the whole time it was their sperm determining the sex of the baby. We're really just coming full circle with all of this. I know you had the really bad nausea while you were pregnant.
Oh,
There's a lot of research showing that can come too from the sperm contribution too.
I saw that. I saw like a TikTok or an Instagram post and I was like, Logan, it's your fault. I'm not blaming this on you. We can do a whole nother episode on like pregnancy and postpartum maybe. And my experiences. If you've had a bad pregnancy, I was right there with you. I have a lot of empathy for you.
But okay, one other thing is men don't just do the over-the-counter sperm test at home. You need a lab to do your sperm test for you, or it's not accurate. And stop using the sauna. No saunaing for like at least 3 months before you're trying to conceive, or you are going to kill your sperm.
There should be like a warning. Is there a warning on saunas about anything
Maybe
like that?
There's probably one about like could be harmful in pregnancy, but I don't think so.
They should start putting a warning on there.
Yeah.
I feel like men would be like, oh no.
Yeah.
Not my sperm.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just think of how many chemicals we breathe in driving down the highway, in our car, and just eating food, even if we're trying to eat well, like that's all affecting things. And we just don't even, just because there's not research for something, like it's for sure affecting.
The toxic load that everyone carries now is so much more than it used to be.
I think it's a huge part of the fertility.
That's a whole nother episode. But yeah, try to decrease your toxic load in whatever way you can.
No microwaving plastics, no Ziploc bags, no fake scents like candles, Febreze.
No nasty air fresheners, no air wicks in your plugs.
No, all of that messes up your hormones. And messes up men's hormones, lowers your testosterone, men. So none of that. Now that we've talked about all of our ideas for society.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that If you're someone who is struggling with infertility and you're considering IUI, IVF, you're wondering what your options are, I highly recommend finding a naturopathic or functional fertility specialist, someone who does fertility, and make sure that you've truly covered all your bases, because don't assume that the IVF clinic is going to. Don't assume that someone else is going to look at that. And I'm just acknowledging that it's hard out there because you do have to advocate for yourself in this realm.
And I think my advice for people is don't push yourself too hard, especially if you're going through recurrent loss. It takes a lot out of you going through that over and over. I'm not saying don't keep trying, but know when to take breaks for your physical health, for your mental health. And the more that you can connect with other people that have gone through your experience, I think the easier it is.
And that's one good point, is the better your mental health is, actually, the better your hormones are going to be, and the more likely you are to have successful pregnancies, because your brain is the one that's sending all these signals down, regulating all the hormones that are happening in your reproductive system. So don't neglect your mental health. Don't ignore stress. Don't ignore your brain chemistry, because all of that actually affects your fertility.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yep, that's all we got. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly reset. If you loved hanging out with us today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share this with a friend who could use a little calm and connection too.
This show is for education and inspiration, not medical advice. To learn more or connect with us, check out the show notes below. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and your heart.